Okay, my Hanukkah, the Gemara says, what is Hanukkah about? The Ton Rabbanon, our Rabbanon learned and taught, Chafi Bekislev Yom the Hanukkah Tmanya Inun Chul. On the 25th of Kislev begins the 8 days of Hanukkah. When the Greeks entered the Beis Hamikdash, Timu Kalash Manim Shevehechel, they caused that all the oils in the Heichel and the Beis Hamikdash should be impure. Which govern Malchus Beis Chashmonai v'Nitzchum, when the kingdom of the house of Chashmonai overcame them and they defeated them. Kenuschat Tfilah Masarta Geborim Yad Chaloshim V'Rabim Yad Ma'atim, as we say in davening, you have transmitted, you have given over the strong in the hands of the weak and the many in the hands of the few. But could they search for like Motzal Pachach Shemen Shahayamunach B'Chaysam Shalkoin Gadol, supposed to be a hay. They found only one small jar of oil that was lying there in with the seal of the Kohen Gadol, and only had sufficient oil to light for 1 day. A miracle occurred with and they kindled from it 8 days. L'shana Acheres, in the following year, Kavum, they established it. They made it Yom Tovim with reciting Hallel and singing praise. It's known the examinations of this in Torah of the Alter Rebbe and the Ramarim that followed with the Rabbeim following the Alter Rebbe. Especially the Maimer that was said 30 years prior to when the Rebbe said this Maimer. Skip the parentheses. What's the question the Gemara asks? What is Chanukah? Chanukah is a well-known thing, just like other Yom Tovim are well-known. The Gemara doesn't ask, what's Purim? Why? Because everybody knows what Purim is. Because it's well-known. Similarly, there's many things that don't even have a mesechta or doesn't have specific halachas like tzitzis. There's no mesechta tzitzis. There's no mesechta Chanukah. Why? Because it's well known. Like we don't find the rules and we don't find even the expression of many brachas in either the Mishnayos or in the Gemara, because they were so well known, there was no reason to record it. The feature even for some because it was very well known. There was no need for studying them in yeshiva because that was what the Gemara is. The Gemara is a transcription of the conversations that went on in the yeshivas. Similar to what's explained in the Rambam Le'inyan Harayis Hamavois B'Gemara, concerning the different proofs that are brought in the Gemara about the Shapirish Priyat Hadar or Esrig V'Leir Moinim Achavushim. How do you know that an Esrig is not pomegranates or a different type of fruit? So the Gemara brings, because Priyat Hadar means Hadar Bilon Michal Mishal Lashana, something that lives in the tree an entire year. So it wasn't that they were bringing this pasuk to prove that this is what an esrig is, because somehow they got confused. What are you supposed to use on Sukkot? And then they figured out it was an esrig because of the pasuk. Not that way. Without a doubt, from the days of Yeshua ben Nun until the present time of the Gemara that brought the proofs that the Priyat Hadar that you're supposed to take as an esrig, they took the esrig and the lulav exactly the way you do it now, and there was no dispute about it. There's no recording of anybody saying no, an esrig, the Priyat Hadar of the pasuk means something else. So why was there a need to bring proofs from the pasuk? They investigated. They were looking for a hint in the pasuk for what was well known. So it was a given, it was a well-known thing that one of the four species is an esrog. And then they tried to find a support and a hint in the pasuk for this. So in the similar vein, Chanukah was well known. So if Chanukah was well known, so the question is on the Gemara, when came Ma'al Gemara, my Chanukah. Therefore, what's the question? The Gemara asks, what is Chanukah? Chanukah was well known. Another question that Rebbe asks, also we need to understand, what is the exact thing that he says? They found a cruse of pure oil lying with the seal of the Kohen Gadol. What was the Kohen Gadol doing putting seals on cruises of oil? It's like saying that you're going to have the head rabbi of the OU is in the plant sticking seals in a factory on a product to say that it's kosher. That's not the job of the chief of the OU or the head rabbi of the Eidah Charedis in Yerushalayim is going to be in some restaurant standing in the kitchen saying that the food is kosher. That's not what the Kohen Gadol does. The Kohen Gadol's job is not to put stamps and seals to say that this shemen is shemen toir. Concerning the kosher status of the oil, if it could be used for the menorah, you don't need a Kohen Gadol at all. Not only is it enough for an ordinary Kohen to be able to ensure that the oil is appropriate for the menorah, even a Yisrael, non-Kohen, can attest to the fact that this oil is pure and is allowed to be used in the Beis HaMikdash. Even the kindling of the menorah, let alone making sure that the oil is pure. You don't need a Kohen Gadol, you don't even need a regular Kohen, not like Korbanos, that you need to have at least a regular Kohen, but the kindling of the menorah is also allowed to be done through a Yisrael as well. So if even the kindling of the menorah you don't need a kohen, how much more so concerning the kosher status of the oil, if it's pure and it can be used, you don't need that it should be a kohen. You need to have someone that the Gemara calls a chaver. A chaver is someone that is trustworthy, that we know we could rely on him when it comes to Tuma and Tara. In the times of the Beis HaMikdash, there were those that weren't reliable on them, that they would take care to make sure that everything is betara. So you need to have someone that was a chaver that made sure that was betara. But that's enough. You didn't need a Kohen Gadol. And we can't say that the reason why it was necessary for a Kohen to seal it and a Kohen Gadol to seal it, because it was found in the Beis HaMikdash itself. A Yisrael is not allowed to enter into the Beis HaMikdash itself. And about the Yisrael lighting the menorah, it says he could light it with a long stick that would stick in to light the menorah. Even for it to be able to reach the Beis HaMikdash, to be stored in the Beis HaMikdash, you still don't need a seal of a Kohen Gadol or even a Kohen. The making of the oil, the preparing of the oil, the pressing of the oil was not in the Beis HaMikdash. It was actually in Tekoa, outside of the Beis HaMikdash. So it could have easily been prepared and sealed by Yisrael. And from the place called Tekoa, the city called Tekoa, they used to bring it to the Beis HaMikdash. What's the idea that it was found lying with the seal of the Kohen Gadol? The Rebbe adds another point to this. Not that it had to be that way, but he's just relating the story. It just happened to be by chance that the Kohen Gadol seal was on it. But since it doesn't matter that it should be with the seal of the Kohen Gadol. All the Gemara should have related is that the oil did not become defiled, and it's not important how and what ensured it, that was a Kohen Gadol seal on it or not. So the Rebbe explains the way we can understand it is by realizing what the spiritual idea of the oil is. The idea behind this is the Milchemes HaYivonim Hoitza Be'ikir Milchama Ruchnis. It was primarily a spiritual battle against the Jewish people. Initially, they did not want to attack the bodies of the Yidden. They didn't want to kill Yidden like in Purim. Like it's brought down in the commentary on Shulchan Aruch called the Lavush. The reason why the many meals on Chanukah are something that's non-obligatory, as opposed to Purim, there's a mitzvah to eat the Purim meal. That on Chanukah we did not establish the Yom Tov of Chanukah for partying and rejoicing like on Purim. What's the difference? Because the celebration was a spiritual victory. In Purim it was saving lives, so it was the physical body. So therefore we celebrate with physical celebrations, beginning with partying with a physical meal. On Chanukah, it wasn't about saving lives. It wasn't the physical lives was in danger. The Yevonim did not want to kill the Yidden. They wanted only their subjugation of the Yidden and removing them from the religion. Therefore, its primary establishment of the celebration was with songs of praise and thanks. These are all spiritual ways of celebrating because the attack was on the spiritual side of a Yid. Now the Rebbe adds a very subtle point. When we say spiritual war, when we talk about spiritual, there is something that is truly, truly spiritual, and then there's something that's spiritual relative to the physical. I'll just tell you outside an example of this. In this world, there's many, many components. The world is a physical place, and in the physical place, there are things that are spiritual in comparison to the physical world. For example, intellect. It's not something you could weigh or touch or see, but so it's spiritual in comparison to the physical world, but it's not true spirituality. So that's the Rebbe is going to explain that the spiritual we're talking about over here is the true spirituality. So he says in the sixth line, in the fifth line, in the second paragraph, is the war against the spirituality that the Greeks waged was not just on a spiritual level, that's just spiritual comparative to the physical, but rather they fought true spirituality, as the Rebbe will explain in a moment. When we talk about intellect, the mind, it's spiritual in comparison to the physical. In a similar vein in the person himself. Even when we compare the intellect in comparison to the person's emotions, it's also, this is more spiritual, this is more in the physical realm. The emotions are the 7 days involved in the creation of the world, meaning every day, as we know, is rooted in Hashem's midah of Chesed is the first day of creation, Gvur is the second day of creation, and so on. So therefore we find that the midas have a connection with the physicality of this world. Like the Rebbe explained in a previous Maimer in that year, that that the midas, Hashem's emotional traits, are a source for the coming into being of the worlds until this physical world. Though in the midas of Hashem, you can't say that's truly actual gashmis, actual physicality, actual materialism. It's still the potential, the allowance for the physicality. The reason why there's a physicality in the literal sense down here below, is because there was already an enabling and a possibility and an allowance given for that in the emotions above. So therefore, emotions is even the way it is by Hashem has to do with the physical existence of the world. As opposed to intellect, it's beyond the world and preceded the world. Like it says, that 2,000 years the Torah preceded the worlds, because Torah is Hashem's wisdom, and therefore it's a level that is beyond the world. The fact that the brain, the intellect, is spiritual, it's in comparison to the physicality of the midas. Was not concerning the intellect itself. Their intention of the Greeks was to make them forget your Torah. They were okay with Yidden having intellect. They weren't fighting the spiritual that's spiritual in comparison to physical. They were fighting that it's your Torah, totally spirituality, and to remove them from the laws of your will. The chol in the Mochamtam hoy neged Torah Savaya v'neged HaMitzvah Shem Chuker Tzaynis Baruch was against the Torah being Hashem's Torah. You could study Torah as long as it makes sense and rational and reasoned, but they didn't like the fact that you're attributing it to any godly aspect, the spirituality of it. And the same thing, the mitzvahs, they didn't want you to do it because it's the laws of His will. The inyan hachukim ba'atzum lo'yoy mafriya lahem imoy chukim basar v'dam. The idea that there are laws itself, that didn't disturb them if you would consider them laws of a human being. Just like the Greeks themselves had the laws of the king. So they were okay with having laws and rules. They battle against the laws of your will. Their war was to make the Yidden forget the one who gave the Torah and the one who commanded the mitzvahs. This is the idea of not making the brachas of the Torah prior to the Torah, making a person forget that the Torah is from Hashem. Let's skip the parentheses to the next paragraph. Last paragraph on the page. The fact that the Greeks were okay with the wisdom of the Torah and still in all they were in opposition against your Torah. Torah itself has in it these two components. Like to explain concerning the Mitzrayim, Egypt of Klippa, there is Mitzrayim of Kedusha, which is the idea of confines and boundaries in Kedusha itself. So just like there is a physical Mitzrayim of Klippa and a spiritual Mitzrayim in the world of Kedusha, so too in Torah there is two components. So he says in 4 lines in the bottom of the page, in Torah there's a level from which the Greeks came about from. Like the Chazal says, if a person merits, it then becomes a medicine for him. If he doesn't merit, it becomes a poison. The difference between life and death in the literal sense is similar to the difference between the spiritual and the physical. Because death has to do with the physical. The idea of the physical is that it's something that expires. That's the idea of death. Let's skip over to the end of the parentheses, next page. The physical is in general, all physical things are considered death because it's under the limitations of time, because it expires. After a while, it's gone. As opposed to spirituality, it's beyond time. The idea of the lack of life doesn't apply by spirituality. It's essentially the idea of life. So that's what it means about the Torah. If he merits, it becomes for him a medicine, a sam chaim. That's what it means if he merited, so that becomes a matter of life, because that's when he has the ruchnius of Torah, so then it's life. And from the level of loizach of Torah, in other words, the part of Torah which has to do with the lower parts, from that came about, by chain descent, the battle of the Greeks, that they opposed the entire idea of Torah. Like we explained previously, that though the battle was against the spiritual, eventually, after their spiritual attacks, it devolved to a physical attack as well. Like the Rambam, when he describes what occurred leading up to the miracle of Hanukkah, he says that the Greeks stretched out their hands to take Jewish money and to take Jewish daughters. Is the beginning of the war, and its primary thing was against the spirituality. To make them forget your Torah, to make them, remove them from the laws of your will. Now we can understand the significance of the seal of the Kohen Gadol. He says in the second paragraph, therefore, the victory in the war against the Greeks was from the jug of oil sealed with the seal of the Kohen Gadol specifically. The L'chura, in a move on, seemingly it's not understood. Matters of impurities depend upon the Sanhedrin. Torah decides what is pure, what is impure. The connection that purity and impurity has to do with the Kohanim is not because they are Kohanim, but because of the Torah that they teach. It says you'll come to the Kohanim and they will be the ones teaching you Torah. So Torah decides what's Tumah, what's Tara, and the Kohanim communicate that information. So therefore, what was the idea of the Kohen Gadol sealing it with his seal? The novelty of this idea of this cruse of oil that was sealed with the seal of the Kohen Gadol, it's the level of davening. It's the avoida of the incense offering. The Rak HaKohen Gadol and Nichnas Lahaktar Toiris, when it came Yom Kippur, only the Kohen Gadol entered to offer the incense offering on Yom Kippur. Though in the Kodesh HaKadoshim there was the Aron and there was the tablets in the Aron, that's the idea of Torah. What was the service of the Kohen Gadol there? He didn't open up the Aron and start studying the Luchos. That wasn't his job. What did he have to do when he went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim on Yom Kippur? He did the avoid of the incense offering. And the idea of the incense offering, it's about elevating the sparks of all the 11 different spices that made up the incense. That's the idea of the 11 spices of the incense offering. That's the idea of davening, because davening is also about elevating the sparks of the Nefesh Bahamis. And davening is sulam mitzvah. It's like a ladder standing on the ground, and its top is reaching to the heavens, which is the idea of the birudim. We raise up and we refine and we elevate the sparks that are down here and we bring it up to heaven. Since the Greeks made impure all the oils, they made a blemish and a defect in all the levels. Even to the level of the Beis HaMikdash. Timu kol hashmanim shebeheichel. Who was allowed to enter the Heichal? That was an ordinary kohen. So they were even able to reach and cause their tumah to reach a state of the Beis HaMikdash of the ordinary kohen. So therefore, how do you counteract that if you have already tumah in the Heichal? So you have to tap into something higher than the ordinary kohen. Therefore, they have to draw down from a much higher level, the level of the kohen gadol, etc. In normal years, when the Yevonim were prohibited from entering the Beis HaMikdash. Even in Yerushalayim, the Rambam wrote that it's prohibited to allow a non-Jew to live in it. Also, you must be kashrastan. Those years, a normal time, since there was no approach of tumah into the heichal, so then an ordinary kayin or an ordinary kosher oil, even by Yisrael, would have been enough. Since the Greeks defiled all the oils that were in the Beis HaMikdash, they had to draw down from a much higher level, somewhere where the defilement didn't reach the level of the Kohen Gadol. And now we can understand, based on this, the first question: what does it mean, my Chanukah? The Rebbe is going to explain. The question is not what is the Yom Tov, but the question is, there are many multiple events that took place that in the Hanukkah miracle. Which specific thing are we marking and celebrating? This is the question that the Gemara asks. What is Hanukkah? Not that it doesn't know what the Yom Tov is. They know what the Yom Tov is, but what specific miracle are we marking it? The Efshali is based for us. There are two possible opinions and views over here. On the one hand, the primary importance is a Jewish body. Though from the perspective of the soul, a Yid, even when he sins, he's still a Yid. Even when he did an Aveda, the Neshama is still faithful to Hashem. And no Jew will be pushed away forever. All of these great qualities of the Neshama is when the body is in existence. But if the body doesn't exist, all of this doesn't apply. So therefore, perhaps the main thing that we need to be concerned about on Hanukkah is the impact on the body, because the body, there is a view to approach and say the main thing is the body. A counterpoint to that, another view is no, the neshama is the main thing. On the other hand, there is a view to say, an opinion to say, that there is an advantage in self-sacrifice, which means the soul should give up the body. Okay, like it's explained, there is a story related that the Beis Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, was promised that he would have the schus to offer up his life for the sanctification of Hashem's name, and because of a particular reason he was punished, and that merit was taken away from him. So we see it's a very high level to give up one's life to such a degree that's even considered like a punishment when he's not able to do so. And then, once that possibility was taken away from him, afterwards he authored his different Svarim. One was called the Beis Yosef Commentary on the Torah, and then after that Shulchan Aruch. So the Rebbe says, how do you call it a punishment? How can you say that this was a punishment? Through this quote-unquote punishment that he wasn't able to give up his life for Hashem, halachas were now spread out throughout Klal Yisrael, what he recorded in the Shulchan Aruch. If he was able to give up his life for the sanctification of Hashem's name, so then this wouldn't have taken place. What do we see from this? That self-sacrifice has something even greater than that. In other words, the neshama is even greater than the body. Who al der Sham Rabbi Akiva, this is similar to what Rabbi Akiva said when he was being tortured by the Romans, that he told the students, Kol Yom Ha'isim Mistar, Chulu Masa Yav Eliyahu V'Akemeno, all my days I was paining over the fact, when will it arrive to my hand, the mitzvah of sacrificing my life for Hashem, and I will fulfill it. The Lechura Lamid seemingly it's a similar question. Why was Rabbi Akiva so upset? Well, like Kula Alib the Rabbi Akiva, it says that the entire Mishnayos and everything that we have now in Torah Sheba'al Peh really was reestablished after the death of the 24,000 students. It was all established and reestablished through Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva shekol Torah Sheba'al Peh nisyashta machmisha talmidim shaloi, that the entire old Torah was founded from the 5 talmidim that were left after the 24,000 died out. So seemingly, if he would have the same question like Rabbi Yosef Kara, the same question as on Rabbi Akiva, you want to die al Kiddush Hashem? What's going to be all this halach, all this Torah Sheba'al Peh? It's dependent upon you. So from the very fact that they weren't hesitant and they realized that for them it was greater even to give up their lives than even the fact that there would be halacha and Torah Sheba'al Peh, skip the parentheses. Elam izeh gufa mucher. From this itself, it's obvious and proven. There is a level of self-sacrifice that's beyond Torah. And based on these two approaches, what's more important, the body or the soul, and just give up one's life? That's the question that the Gemara asks, what is Chanukah? For what did they establish the primary idea of Chanukah? For this he answers, they found a cruse sealed with the seal of the Kohen Gadol. It's a level beyond the chain order of descent. It's a level that's called the shadow of the shadow, which means the innermost level of the neshama, the yechida, that it says Klippa doesn't have. Because it was a level of Kohen Gadol, the shadow of the shadow, the level of yechida, the Yevanim could not defile it even. The Yevanim defiled all the oils that were in the Beis HaMikdash. What was higher than Seder Shtalshel was higher than the outer area of the Beis HaMikdash. They couldn't defile the Bebuah because they don't have a level that can be what's called the shadow of the shadow. That's the idea of being sealed with the seal of the Kohen Gadol. It's the level of Yechida, in a simple sense. What results from Yechida? The self-sacrifice. That they were willing to sacrifice their lives, despite the fact they were weak and few. How were they willing to sacrifice it? It's the level of Yechida. So that is the celebration of Chanukah. The Yechida part, the Mesiras Nefesh part, the self-sacrifice beyond the body, and therefore we don't celebrate with meals and we don't celebrate with physical things because it's not about the physical celebration, it's about the spiritual celebration, the self-sacrifice they had, which was the idea of the cruse of oil of the Kohen Gadol. And then the Rebbe connects it with Pada V'Shalom, since it's not long after Yudis Kislev, this is also connected with what the Rebbe said in the previous mimer on Yudis Kislev of that year, about he redeemed in peace my soul from those that battled me, skip the parentheses, that the middle Rebbe explains it's avoida that comes from the level of the Yechida of the person's soul. And Yechida means through Mesiras Kol HaEtzem, it's one giving over and devoting their entire essence to Hashem. It's even beyond devoting one's will to Hashem. When you give over your entire essence to Hashem, this battle the opponent's whole entire existence become nullified. Then the redemption is in a peaceful manner. When there is an opponent and you have to defeat him, so then there is a war. But when is it a peaceful manner? When the opponent ceases to exist. Why? Because you have reached such a deep state of the Yechida. And this is also what says that these candles of Chanukah will never cease. Like the Ramban explains, it's not talking about the neiros of the base of Mikdash, but it's talking about the candles of Chanukah. The candles of Chanukah are unchanging. That Shizawa Ilu the neiros Chanukah al neiros Hamikdash. This is the advantage of the candles of Chanukah over the candles of the base of Mikdash. Even though the candles of the base of Mikdash are beyond change, there's still changes in holiness itself, which is the fact that after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, they cease to be. As opposed to the candles of Chanukah that came about through self-sacrifice, the level of Yechidah, they never cease. They're always here with us, even after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, like we learned in yesterday's Shiur. And we kindle them also in the time of exile. That's a level of victory. Victory is despite anything, we still persevere. It's also a good translation for Netzach is perseverance. As it's known, the two opinions concerning the Yom Tov of Chanukah, which sphere it has to do with. Some say it has to do with Netzach, sometimes it says it's a level of Hoid. And that's why it says Halal v'Hoidah, because it has to do with the sphere of Hoid. In general, in the writings of the Arizal, it's brought down to the level of Hoid. Like I mentioned before, Hoid is Lahal. That's the idea of giving praise and singing songs of Halal. But in the Maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe that we quoted earlier from 30 years prior to this Maimer of the Rebbe, it's when you enumerate and you count the spheres going from below to above and the Yom Tovim from below to above, so then it's the sphere of Netzach is a level of Chanukah. Like the Frierdiker Rebbe explains in the Basel Lagani continuation of Mamarim, the series of Mamarim known as Basel Lagani, for the sake of victory, the king expends all of his treasures until he's even willing to throw his life away for victory. From this we see that victory touches and reaches a place that's beyond a revealed life force, and that's why he's willing to give up his revealed life for the sake of victory. That's the level of the Yechidah, it's beyond the revealed life. Therefore, it's everlasting because it's beyond the limitations and changes of the external life force of the body and so on. That's the idea of the candles of Chanukah. The level of victory. That they will never cease. They're beyond the worlds, even the way the world is in its most perfect state. We affect it until the legs of the Tarmadoi cease, meaning through that we make stop the idea of Tarmadoi, the same letters like the word rebellious, until we will praise and give thanks to your great name. His great name is the name Yud Kei Vav Kei in Keser, and it's concluded that it's missing over here the end of the Maimer.